year or so.
Hi, my name is Dawood. I'm the Muslim fellow at Abrahamic House.
And I'm Austin, and I'm the Jewish fellow here, and we're happy that you guys are all here. And as you might have heard, this is being recorded, and we're going to post it on our website and send it to people who have more questions about the application process.
Yeah, so I thought we'd just get started by asking everyone to share a little bit about their background and what they were doing before they started the fellowship. Doe, do you want to start?
Yeah, sure. Before coming to the Abrahamic House, I was very new to DC. I come from Afghanistan. I've studied political science there in public administration, and I worked there for 4 years doing dialogue moderation, qualitative research kind of work. Yeah.
Cool. Austin, do you want to share?
Yeah, so before Abrahamic House, I was living in Chicago, and I was working as a journalist. And then when I learned that I was moving to DC because I got a job transfer, and I had heard about Abrahamic House through a friend of mine, and I ended up applying and getting here. And so I basically moved into the house at the same time as I moved to DC.
Cool. And Alex?
Sure. Yeah, I'm from Arlington actually. I was out west for a bit, came back. So I was practicing architecture, and that's still what I'm doing.
And maybe you can share about what inspired you to apply for Abrahamic House, what drew you to the fellowship, and why you thought this was an interesting opportunity for you. And anyone can jump in.
Sure. Yeah. I got involved in interested in interfaith dialogue through architecture. We work a lot with different congregations, different Christian, not yet Muslim, but hopefully one day, and Jewish congregations. And hearing people describe the way that they interact with their space to an outsider, you watch them learn something about themselves. And the opportunity to participate in that 24/7 is really just remarkable.
Yeah, awesome. Austin, what drew you to the Abrahamic House Fellowship?
So when I was in Chicago, I had and previously when I was in New York City, I had been a participant in a similar organization called Moshe House, which is for the Jewish community. That group brings together 3 to 5 young professional Jews who host events at their own home for the community. And I had that been a pretty core part of my social life. There was one house
I'm
where I
sorry,
was having.
I'm sorry, Austin, but like your voice is like kind of like a robotic, so maybe there's something in the headphone.
Yeah, I could. How about now it goes? I'll reconnect and come back in.
It's better now. I don't know if I think it was just maybe adjusting the microphone.
Okay, is this sounds better?
Yeah, it sounds much better.
Okay, great. So I was living in Chicago, and I was quite involved with some of these different community groups. And for me, having the loneliness crisis, helping people find. It sounds bad again.
Yeah,
Alex?
sorry, Austin. You might want to
I
disconnect.
don't. Maybe it's yeah. Okay.
But maybe Dowd, you can jump in.
Yeah, sure. Well, for me, I was new to the US, and I think I am going to live my considerable amount of time here, my life here. And so it was important for me to get to know these two other different religions that is quite integral part of the American society. And so that was one of the motivations for me to apply to Abrahamic House. Apart from that, religion in a lot of ways has affected the our countries in different ways, and it keeps you thinking about that, and so that was another motivation for me to see how other faiths look at those things.
Great. Thank you, Austin. Maybe you can jump back in now if your audio is working again.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder if all of us are on the same Wi-Fi. So I'm on the cell phone service now, so hopefully it's a little better.
Yeah,
Sounds okay.
Yeah.
So like I was saying, I basically was having really interested in community building and religion and helping people find their space in this world for a long time. And when I heard about the mission of Abrahamic House, I just thought it was so beautiful, and I wanted to be a part of it. I hadn't really done too much interfaith engagement before I got to Abrahamic House, but I was really excited to be part of a community that kind of leaned into people, helping just them to discover where they want to live and who they want to be in this world.
That's great. Yeah, those are all great reasons, and really, any reason that draws you to interfaith is a great reason to apply for the fellowship. It's just a great experience to get outside your comfort zone and learn something about a different culture and different communities. And you know, I think all of you would say that you have learned a lot and encountered a lot of different cultures just by being a part of Abrahamic House.
Mm-hmm.
What were your biggest fears or apprehensions or things that made you nervous before you applied to the fellowship, and which of those were realized for you and which of those turned out to be, you know, just an anxiety?
I think one of my fears going in, having tried to get involved in some of the interfaith spaces through my church and other Christian organizations, is that it would be maybe tokenizing or not relational. And sometimes I think that people in certain circles come into an interfaith environment to hear themselves talk and to check a box. They tokenize themselves. And what I was relieved to find is how relational and how people first this space is. And Austin often reminds us and our visitors that we're not here as representations and experts in our own faith. We're here as individuals who adhere and reflect some aspect of that faith. And so if I say something that's not completely Catholic, I don't have to carry that burden, but I can still have that relationship with someone who might give them a new perspective on something that otherwise seems like a monolith that they might not have access to. So to me, it's been an exciting journey.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. We're not expecting our fellows to be ordained or you know, the perfect adherents of their religion, or even necessarily like extremely religious or particularly religious, you know, just people who identify with a certain faith background and are willing to engage with people from other faith backgrounds. Austin or Daud, were there things you were nervous about before the fellowship?
Well, first on Alex's point, I mean, I think one thing we've all discovered is the importance of maybe not our own personal faiths, but in bringing our own communities into the house. Like, we kind of realize that takes a lot of work, that maybe, you know, we've had a really good attendance over the last year and a half, but getting to those good numbers takes a lot of time and effort on our part. And it takes us to have to really go out there and build relationships and go to the happy hours and, you know, just kind of bring people into the house, because in DC, people have so many options, and we want to make sure that they're choosing to come to our space and our events. And I think it's been really successful. And so for me, it's when I'm thinking about who would be a good fit here, it's people who are able to kind of make connections and meet someone at a coffee shop, and then that person ends up becoming a regular at Abrahamic House. I know that's not easy, and of course, no one's perfect at that, but that's, I think, a really important skill. I guess when I'm thinking about fears, I mean, the biggest one was the roommates. You know, are they gonna be judgmental? Are they gonna, you know, what's that gonna be like? Or are they gonna, you know, how is that relationship gonna happen? And I think I've been extremely lucky. Alex and Daud are amazing, and I just have felt like it's been built an amazing relationship with one another. But that was definitely my biggest worry, was just how we're gonna function together as roommates and event hosters and community builders, because Abrahamic House is a 24/7 community. We aren't just meeting together 3 times a week.
Yeah, and I think, you know, to ease any apprehension from applicants about that, that is always an anxiety that applicants are going to have about who they're going to be rooming with and what the vibe is going to be. But we think a lot about that when we are interviewing people. We really want to put together a group of people who will challenge each other and have differences and come from different backgrounds, but also who are going to get along and who are going to build a great community together. So, Do, did you have something you wanted to add too?
Yeah, definitely. I think one thing that was a concern and in some ways is still a concern is that how does this fellowship affect my security situation back home or my family's? Gave it a lot of thought, and I think at some point I realized that you either have to regress towards that space or you gotta take a bold decision and move forward. And I think now that I reflect on it, I think it was a good decision because now I'm more posed to actually talk to anybody who's actually belligerent to me than I was before these 2 years of experience.
Yeah. That's a great point. I also want to say for people who are asking questions in the chat that we will get to those questions towards the end, but there are some other questions we want to honor first. So, but thank you for asking them, and I do see them. So, can you?
And one thing, Tommy, along the Dowd's point about safety or whatever, I had a less important concern, but concern about like my career and about that kind of thing. And Abrahamic House works very closely to make sure that they address all the concerns. Like we definitely have had times when we haven't taken photos at events because certain people have been there that we were, that they were concerned. There's just a lot of things we could do to kind of alleviate and make sure that any worries, whether it's about associations or people who are coming or security, that those are addressed, and it is taken very seriously by the organization.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even just guests who are coming to events, we try to take their security and their personal preferences into account. If they don't want to be photographed or they don't want their images shared, we will certainly honor that. And we will work really closely with you if you're a fellow to make sure you're comfortable. And we always have a member of staff available to talk to. So thank you. Thanks so much for addressing that. How do you all feel about balancing your professional and work lives and personal lives too with being an Abrahamic House Fellow? Is it something that's difficult for you or easy for you, or talk a little bit about that?
I think each of us probably had a different experience. Dawood is a graduate student. I work a much less flexible
I'm a graduate
job.
student. I'm a graduate now.
He's a graduate, excuse me. Congratulations to our graduate. I wish a graduate.
Yeah.
Young professional. And Austin, as journalists, has a little bit more flexibility. And I think that this is a time commitment, and it should be treated that way. And beyond just the events that you're planning, you're investing in the people that you live with the same way you'd invest in a family. And it does take time, and to pretend like this is easy, it would be a joke and it would be a disservice to you. But within that, what I found is that because not only the three of us fellows started to care about each other immensely, but even the staff, and especially Mo, we've found that when there's an issue or there's a time crunch for work, there are so many ways to accommodate for it. And even sometimes when we got so excited about a project or a different event, it took a fellow or a staff to be like, calm down, let's prioritize. You need to take care of yourself first. And so I felt like all of us had each other's backs and were able to help moderate that to make sure that our lives came first and made sure that we were okay.
And then we also, a big part of it is scheduling. And so that's something where the fellows are essentially in charge of the calendar and figuring out when the events are happening. And so that was definitely a big thing. Like when I was traveling or when Dowd had finals or Alex had a deadline, we would make sure to work around that. So in some of our months, we had 3 of our events in 1 week, just because that worked best for our schedule, even if it wasn't like the ideal. And the bigger thing I would say is that going into this, I think only Alex had actually been to the house before for an event. But yet when you live here, it creates a really strong like buy-in. Like all of us care deeply about this community. And so even though it is a lot of work, we don't necessarily consider it work. It's more like we're viewing it as we're building up our community and we're something that we enjoy. And so I do think that it does take a lot of effort. I mean, there definitely were times when I was in the kitchen all day on a Friday, you know, when I was supposed to be working or whatever. But because that's why I wanted to make sure that we had a really good Shabbat dinner that night. And so I do think that there is an amount of flexibility, but hosting 3 events does take a significant amount of effort. And it's the 3 events plus a lot of time with your roommates. You know, we're regularly going to each other's religious services and obligations, even if they aren't showing up on Instagram.
Yeah, just to add on that, I guess the platform that Abrahamic House provides is very interesting because you could either treat the events as your personal life, or you can treat that as your work life as well. And it's completely upon you on how you design it for yourself. I mean, I have friends who through the events are part of my personal life. And I have friends from school of my personal life who have become part of the event. So I think it's kind of a mix there, and the mix is for good. I must say that, especially if you're new here, you need to curate a personal life for yourself, and that means you need to have friends and you need to have a community, and that is where Abrahamic House could really help you.
Yeah, those are all really great points. I also think that the community around Abrahamic House helps out a lot, like on top of the staff. Like there are a lot of people who come to our events who care and want to help out and pitch in, and that makes, you know, the work balance thing a little easier. I want to ask also what you feel like what a typical month really looks like at Abrahamic House. You're hosting 3 events, maybe 2 some months, maybe 4 some months, but maybe just briefly go through how it feels or what a schedule is like.
Well, the first thing is we have like a bunch of different group chats. Is we have the group chat with just the 3 of us. There's the group chat with like the broader staff. There's other group chats, and then they're basically just the social media group chat. Like we're basically just constantly on our WhatsApps, just coordinating things, and you know, sending photos, getting Instagram posts, that sort of thing. And that's kind of our main method of communication, I would say. In a typical month, it all starts with when are we going to have the events? And so typically, Alex, Dowd, and I will have a sit-down conversation, and we'll look at the calendar, and we'll say, and we all have ideas, and say, oh, I want to do an event about X, or an event about Y, or an event about Z, and then we try to figure out how do we make it fit in the calendar. And so we're typically looking and saying, oh, there's this Muslim holiday coming up, or a Christian holiday, or a Jewish holiday. We're saying, oh, do we want to do an event about that? Or do we want to do an event unrelated to it? Or do we want to do an event that's related but not on the same day? And so it comes down to scheduling. The thing to think about it is when it comes to it, let's say we're having an event on Tuesday or Wednesday, we need to make sure the house is clean. That's part of it, right? Because we want people coming into a dirty house. And so Alex, Dowd, and I are going to clean up the downstairs living room and the kitchen, make sure everything looks nice. And then the day of the event, we set up maybe a couple hours before, and then we actually host the event. And then the next day we clean up because now we want to live here and the house is dirty again. And so there is a good amount of work just in like, I guess, set up and tear down for all of our events.
Yeah, I think every month, I must say, looks different based on the schedule, based on what is somebody going through. And the other person, I mean, I've had so many times where I had exams and all, and in that month, I didn't contribute as much as Alex and Austin did, and they took more of the burden on them. And also to point that again is that Abrahamic House is unique in the fact that the 3 fellows who are going to come next year can curate their own monthly schedule, their own way of doing things. So there's a lot of room in there to design your own month here.
And I think that as far as, and maybe we'll talk about events later, but we got close with the previous cohort of fellows as well. And I know that they ran their events differently, and they took more responsibility individually for each event. And early on, and that worked really well. I did get to enjoy some of their events previously, and they were all marvelous. And the 3 of us, because we just had different backgrounds and had moved in simultaneously, made an agreement early on to start to share events. So even if it were a Jewish holiday or Christmas or Eid, we took a lot of, we all contributed. And that, I think, lightened the burden. So except for Shabbat dinners, that's all Austin. He cooks such great food. So that's it. But besides that, I think that helped bring new perspectives. And I think we got very tight because of that, because there's something unique about living with roommates that you're working towards a shared goal. And I think that helped deepen our relationship a lot and stress us out less, hopefully.
Yeah.
And then also we're choosing events that we're excited about, right? Like in almost every single case, I don't think there was a single case, like the events are coming from the three of us. And so that means that at least one of us is excited for this event. And so that makes it a lot easier because it's something that one of us thought of and wants to see come to fruition.
Yeah, I think it's important to stress that there's a lot of flexibility in the kinds of events that you all do and that you can choose to do. And if there's a month where things are stressful and chaotic, like you can always choose as a fellow to do a smaller scale event or a more relaxed event. There's never an obligation to do, 3 giant events every month. But those events are fun too. I think that you would all say that those are some of the more enjoyable events. Not all the time, necessarily.
And then Tommy, on that point, you also could do some events outside of the house. Like sometimes
Right.
it's a little bit easier if we want to visit like a religious institution, or we went to a choir concert a few weeks ago. And then also partnerships. Like, there are times when we partner with other organizations, and that helps to make a little bit less effort in some cases.
Yeah, that's a
And
great
as far as scale goes, I mean, one thing I think we all learned is it's really fun to plan the big events. Getting to decorate it and organize and a giant party is memorable, and they are some of my favorite events. But one thing that I think, looking back and reminiscing, we've had some smaller intimate events that the conversations have been really powerful and really meaningful. And going forward, if you have to choose, there's probably not a right answer, but don't pick a giant event at the loss of a really meaningful small event.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, there's no difference. The impact I think that you all feel and that guests feel, it's not about scale. Like I think the small events are very impactful and you can have great conversations. I want to move on to just ask about your first impressions with each other and how you built your relationships. You were strangers before you moved in. How did you forge the bonds that you have now?
Dawood and I moved in when Hema was still here, so the previous Muslim fellow, and we all got really close. And we would barbecue on the back porch, and we were talking. And I remember Dawood and I were chatting one day, and we were so worried about this new Jewish fellow. Like, what would he be about? Would he ruin the vibe? We were having a good time, and we were already thinking about our events and planning things and talking about how we wanted to do stuff. And we did Zoom him in, and he's cool, but we weren't convinced by the Zoom. And we talked about cooking, which is great because he makes challah. But honestly, having him move in, it really started to feel like a family when we had all 3 of us working towards something. And they're brothers. Yeah.
Do you reciprocate? Alex said you're brothers.
Oh my gosh, guys, leave me hanging.
No, I could go. No, I agree. I mean, I think this is not like a normal roommate situation at all. I mean, I think one thing to remember is there's an application process, and so the people are just like Dowd and Alex are just amazing, awesome people who care about this stuff. So that's one thing to think about. Second, we're not just roommates, we're community leaders and community members. And what that means is that just the house is so much more fun. Like we're constantly watching weird movies and talking about religious topics and philosophy and debating. I mean, it definitely is the best roommate situation I've ever had, just in terms of the quality of the relationships, because we really consider ourselves to be, we're building something greater here than just ourselves. Like, it's, they talk about how we're kind of standing shoulder to shoulder and looking out, right? Like, we're not just living here, but we're actually part of a greater mission, which is interfaith understanding and community and helping people see the joint humanity in one another. And so that, to me, I think just creates a much stronger bond. And then secondly, like, when things are running late and the chicken is not even baked and guests are coming in 2 minutes and then someone shows up 10 minutes early, like, it's really stressful, right? But that builds so much like fun things, because like that idea of working together to build really strong relationships because of that.
Yeah, I think that's I agree to all of that. And I guess just to add on that, as Austin just mentioned, this is like a unique partnership, and in that way, like, I've met Austin's family a few times. I've stayed at their house in New York. I've stayed at Alex's at their house. Alex's mom recently, we went and we bought my graduation suit together. So it's just not very limited to the person only, but the families, and then creates a different kind of bond. I mean, I will always think about them, their parents, before I make a conclusion about them. And we're all very diverse people, just by default, if nothing else, if we've lived in the same room our whole lives, but just being from 3 different faiths is quite diverse, and that means you get to hear different perspectives, and that creates curiosity, and I guess that leads into friendship. And again, as Austin said, there's a mission, there's a vision that at least somehow we look forward to. And I guess when you look ahead, then these little pitfalls of small little things, those don't really count so much. And I guess if this would have been just a normal housing situation where the three of us live together without that big mission, I think there might have been more problems than there are right now.
Yeah, those are all great answers. Thanks. I got a really great question from Esma. Shout out to Esma. I think, you all were talking about events and the different kinds of events that we host. I think if each of you could say an event that you hosted that was one of your favorites, and maybe talk a little bit about it, and why it was such a great event, and maybe describe what a small event looks like and what a big event might look like. That could be more of a general question, but
I'll go. So I think two of my most fun events, like the ones I thought were the most impactful, one was like just our Purim party. Like, we had this idea of doing a Purim play. And so we basically just turned an event that could have just been like a normal social thing into actually something where people could learn about the story of Purim and learn about a little bit more about Judaism. And we got like our whole community to play roles in this silly, crazy play. And now we've done it twice in a row. And so hopefully, if the new fellows want to do it, we'll do it again next year. And so I just think for me, it was just a way of kind of putting on a play for our community in our living room. The photos are hilarious. And then afterwards, we get to have a giant party where everyone's dressed up in costumes and everything. And so I just think that's a good way of like showing how even something on the more social end of the spectrum can be really meaningful. And then on the more, I guess a little bit more religious end of the spectrum, one of my favorite events was called Sacred Sips, where I got to play bartender for a night, and I got to basically make 3 mocktails and show, like, I did a cooking demonstration and showed the community how to make 3 different types of mocktails. And then we had a whole discussion on the role of alcohol in society. And the reason I thought that was really interesting is because there's really big differences in our religions. Like, Judaism loves wine and views wine as like a really, high and important thing, versus, Mormons and Muslims have a much more, you don't like alcohol as much typically. And so and I think that event actually brought in people who had a really diverse view about alcohol. And I thought it's one of the things I love about this house is that we could actually lean into our differences, and that we're not going to shy away from discussing the differences, but we actually want to highlight them and talk about them and figure out if there's ways we can learn from each other when it comes to them.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's a hard question because there's so many memorable events. To that, I appreciated. We built a sukkah, which is if you don't know, it's a Jewish festival for Sukkot, and you build an outdoor structure that traditionally you would eat observantly. You would eat every piece of food in that outdoor structure, and it's very very difficult to make because there's so many rules. And many people today will buy a kit and just put it up, but we didn't buy a kit. We went and got bamboo and we constructed, which was great because I'm an architect and it was so much fun. But we actually had good friends from Israel who came to build it, and we would spend an entire day building this giant sukkah on our back porch. And so many people came to eat because they didn't have access to a sukkah somewhere else. And it was really special because this was right at the beginning of October, and when everything seemed really normal. And we had a wonderful movie night, and we had people from Gaza, we had people from Israel all singing, and it was crazy to imagine how much things changed in a week, but it was a powerful reminder that this was a space that people gathered, and all of those people have been back and they felt safe and loved here. And it was beautiful then, but looking back at it now, I don't think I understood how precious that is even today. And then another event we did, and I thought it was the dumbest event ever. Dawood suggested it our first or second month. You remember this, Austin? He suggested, let's talk about back to school, because it was his first month back to school. And what does that have to do with anything? But we invited everybody to come with pictures of their very first day of school and to talk about their education experience. And I invited some friends because I felt obligated, not because I thought it would be fun. I learned so much about them, even though I'd gone to middle school and elementary and kindergarten with them. And I saw different perspectives, people from all over the world who were looking at the way that their childhood had shaped them and impacted them today and the way they see the world. So grateful we had that event, and I'm really grateful we did it at the beginning, because it changed the way I thought about all the events that we curated later.
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I think this would be the only question where we could go at war with each other, because I think we really feel like all the events that we put on are really good. And in that line of thought, I must say that I put a lot of effort into this back to school event, and that is one of my favorite events because it was really interesting and fulfilling to see so many different perspectives from Tunisia, Israel, the US, a lot of other countries, Pakistan, Afghanistan, where I come from, talk about how they grew up and what they learned about other faiths. And it was not very nice. And it's interesting that I think one of the impression that I had never would have was that it wasn't so good in the US. And I think it was very, very informative and full of knowledge. We really challenged a lot of assumptions and the way we grow up and how that really shapes what we know of others today.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Those are all great answers. I want to also move on to another participant question that I thought was really interesting. Do you feel like if someone is maybe on a journey to reconstruct their relationship with their faith, would they still be a good fit for this program? Or do you think it's better to have a more established relationship with your beliefs or religion? Oh, that was Esma's question too. Wow, great. You're doing great, Esma. But yeah, how do you feel about, your relationship to your own faith and the experience of being a fellow, and how it has impacted it?
That's a great question. And I can't say what type of relationship with faith would make for the best fellow. I think each cohort is going to be different. And that's kind of the beauty of the experience, is that we shape it so much. At the very beginning, Mo said, this is your fellowship. You guys decide what you want to make it. But as far as I think my personal experience, coming in religious and open to learning more, but even with certain expectations, I learned a lot about my faith by seeing other faith. For example, I think I came in thinking that forgiveness was a uniquely Christian value, obviously important in Islam and Judaism, and not concretely, but I think that was my perception. And I think over the course of the early few months, I saw how visible mercy was and prioritized mercy is in my friend's expression of Islam and Judaism in a way that I didn't necessarily see in my own community. And it's something that is a Christian value as well, but isn't expressed the same way. And so that was something I wanted to get closer to. And that was something that I think I'm still exploring and need to find depth in. So I think sometimes seeing your own religion through the eyes of somebody else gives you a new perspective and an opportunity to really kind of hone in on what you value.
I would say that for me, a major goal of the house is when people come here is that they learn about other faiths and their own faiths, and that they also are encouraged to ask questions. And so what that means for me is that I don't need to be the perfect Jewish person, and of course that's impossible, but I want to be able to be in a position where I could educate people and at least explain what's happening. And I think that's also what Alex and Dowd do too. And so for me, like I think there's the personal aspect of like who I am as a person and where I am along my own journey of observance. There's also the aspect of that we're kind of educators in a sense, and that there's people here who have never, been to an iftar before or have never celebrated Christmas before, right? And so for us, it's like we're trying to help bridge some of those gaps and explain our religions to people who might never have experienced it or have only experienced it once or twice. At the same time, I've also been very surprised is that I think sometimes, like when I was talking to rabbis about this, some of them were concerned that they're, oh, are you gonna, you're gonna be exposed to all of these non-Jewish people? Maybe it's gonna make you less Jewish or whatever it is. And it's actually the opposite. I mean, basically, by having this house, I feel like I've actually grown so much in my understanding of my own religion and my understanding of other people's religion. And there's been so many people like that who come to the house. There's people who come to our events and they're like, yeah, like I wouldn't feel comfortable at this point going to a synagogue for whatever reason, but I still want to celebrate the holiday. And that's why I come to Abrahamic House. And to me, I think that's such a beautiful thing that we're able to be a space that's welcoming and open to all people, regardless of where they are on their journeys. And like Alex said, none of us are clerics. We're not professionals at all. We're just people who live here, and we're just doing our best. And so we're not expecting you to be the perfect representation of your faith at all.
Yeah, just to add on that, I guess change is inevitable. I mean, nobody would question anything at any point of your journey here. I think the three of us have absolutely changed our perceptions of our own faiths in whatever way it is. But I must say that it will show up in your events. If you're on that path, it will show up in your events. But as long as you have some basic principles in mind, you will be totally fine. Yeah.
Yeah, those are all great answers. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask some sort of specific questions. Because the rent is subsidized, some applicants have kind of wondered whether or not fellows have the autonomy or freedom to host friends and family to stay at the house. Are you able to accommodate things like overnight guests and having, friends and family visit and stay with you?
Yeah, it has never been an issue at all, not at all. I mean, this is our house first, and then anything Abrahamic house, and that's been communicated with us on the first day, the second day. Anytime Mo sees us, he's like, "What's going on? Don't be stressed. Don't be this and that." So nothing like that. It's just like, first of all, it's our own house. We've had months where we didn't felt like literally having an event, but we still did it. But the Abrahamic house was totally fine with not having that an event in that particular month because of the circumstances of that month. So we are very flexible. We've had so many people sleeping over here, right? Like Austin's friends, my friends. We had a little angel visit us. She slept at Alex's room. She was like 10 years old, my friend's daughter. It's lovely. Yeah.
Yeah.
And then also just in the setup of our house, it's nice because the first floor is we kind of view it more as the public area, and the second floor is like where our bedrooms are. And so there is kind of a separation. And so like I don't think I've ever had any, like I've had my friends in my bedroom, but never like just random people, right? So we kind of, that's just a way that we still feel like we have our own private space, which is important. And like Dowd mentioned, the house is first and foremost is where we live. And so the organization is never going to ask us to host something and we wouldn't feel the ability to say no. You know, so it's always a thing. They're like, someone wants to visit the house. Is that okay with you? It's always an ask. It's never an order.
And to that point, I mean, maybe there are rules in the handbook, but I think that generally, like they both said, this is our house, and the rules that we had between the three of us will be different than the next cohort's rules. They're roommates. You'll have to figure it out with them and figure out what's best for your dynamic and the way you guys want to live your lives.
Yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting, Tommy. I'm just like, since we're speaking about the house, do you mind, Alex, to show us like your plants in the, do you still have the plants in the here or not?
Oh, Alex, you're muted.
You're muted.
Got so excited about plants. We've got this very feisty squirrel who keeps eating them, but we've got, let me see if I can, here we go. Well, we've got this fantastic porch. If you haven't been here, I will welcome for the first time. So we've got a great porch out here. And they've graciously let me garden out here, which has been fun. But our squirrels keep eating our roses, which is driving me nuts, but he's pretty cute, so I can't complain too much.
And we also have a grill that we got, which is great for the summer, for hamburgers or whatever. And then and if you haven't been to the house, we have a large living room, large dining room, good sized kitchen. And so it's in one of the best neighborhoods in DC. It's extremely safe, DuPont Circle. It's really we're so lucky to live here.
Mm-hmm. It's right in there. Dowd's in the living room now.
All right, yeah, thank you for the tour, Alex.
Thank
Alex,
you for giving my coordinates to these people.
Alex, I also wanted to ask you specifically, as currently the only woman in Abrahamic House, I just, in the past, we've had fellowships where it's been 2 women or 3 women and 1 male representative. Sometimes it's been more balanced, but how does it feel being the sole woman right now as part of Abrahamic House?
Sure. And I'm curious to see what Haima would say as well. Last year he was the sole male representative, but I think that at the core of this, it is, like both of them have said, it's mission focused, and there's a lot of mutual respect. So I never felt any insecurity or safety issues whatsoever. And honestly, it's been great because I don't cook at all, but both Dowd and Austin make bread multiple times a week. We buy 10-pound bags of flour, and they're always in the kitchen, and Austin does the dishes every night. So no complaints. As a woman, I feel so blessed.
That's great. Thanks, Alex. Austin, I wanted to ask, because you started your fellowship right after moving from Chicago to DC, did you feel like through Abrahamic House you were able to establish yourself and build a network and meet people in a new city?
Yeah, I mean, that's definitely one of the things that I think all of us focused on is in bringing our communities into the house. And so for me, it felt like it kind of immediately gave me credence. Like when I was able to go to the local synagogues or go to some of the other groups, I was able to say, oh, I'm the Jewish fellow at Abrahamic House. And many of them, some of them knew who we were, some of them didn't, but it kind of was able to kind of establish us and establish me. And so it really helped me build a much stronger group of personal friends, many of which have become house regulars. And then second, that's one thing I would highlight again is that outreach is just so important because it's how we build our community. And so for me, I think we've now done partnerships with like 3 or 4 different Morsha houses in the area and some other groups, and the Georgetown Mosque. Like, there's all these groups that we've worked with or visited that I think have acted. And so I'm hoping that in the next year's cohort, now that we're in our 3rd cohort here in DC, it will only get easier because we're more established. I remember we were trying to do an event early on, and we were trying to bring together a rabbi, an imam, and a priest. And it was really hard for me to find like a rabbi because I wanted to like someone who I built a relationship with, but that doesn't happen overnight. And so I think that hopefully the new cohort, many of the relationships will obviously introduce you, and you'll kind of have more resources going into your year.
Yeah, that is a nice thing about, I mean, this is only the 2nd year that we've been in DC, but with each fellowship, we build more connections and we have a more in-depth community. I also wanted to ask Daoud specifically about that as well, about, being relatively new to DC, and also like your experience as a student at Georgetown. A lot of people had questions about whether this is a good opportunity for students, and what was it like being a student as well as being an Abrahamic House Fellow?
It was beautiful. I mean, I had a lot of my friends come visit the Abrahamic House, and I think that brought a lot of richness to the community, to the conversations, and the quality of people at Abrahamic House. And we've made some community through my school, and it also opens up venues of partnerships. We've been the rabbi at Georgetown is a good friend, and we've visited him. He was supposed to give us the shank at Cedar, but I went with him, but he just didn't have it. Same is the case with the imam. We've had a good relation with him. We've been to the mosque so many times, and I think it's a really good place to bring in people. And it also is if the fellows are good, like if the next fellows are just like Austin and Alex, it will never affect your studies. You'll have your own time to study. They're so respectful in that regard. It's been a good experience.
There was another question from a participant about how, and I think this also, fits in nicely with the question we wanted to ask about, is how can the world understand and implement your motives and objectives as Abrahamic House Fellows? And I think that's also just about how do you bring your fellowship experience out into the world? Like what are the plans post-fellowship? What would you carry on from this experience in your lives moving forward?
Well, I think for me, like the biggest value of this house is in-person relationships and encounters. And I think right now, especially in such a polarized world, it's really good to be able to bring people together across a dinner table and to really have conversations and get to know each other as full people and humans. And that's really for me, the biggest focus is that in a really challenging time, Abrahamic House is a place where people come together and want to meet the other, and we want to be able to disagree and debate respectfully and get to know a different perspective. And I think that to me just again this the focus is getting off our phones and looking someone in the eye and having a conversation. And I think we've had a really successful year or 18 months at that. And that's something I definitely want to bring forward as I think about my life is how do I'm worried about that. Like when I leave this space, how am I going to keep up such a diverse and ideologically divergent friend group? How am I going to keep having, parties with people of all types come here? Like so many of my friends have come to the events. They're like, wow, there's people I meet at the house that I don't meet anywhere else. I don't see people like this in different parts when I'm going to my normal happy hours in DC. And so that to me is I want to keep being a place where we can engage the other.
That's a great question. And I think it's something we're all thinking about a lot now that we're looking to transition. Uh, who I think when we first moved in, Mo asked us what we wanted to get out of this year. And then it was just 1 year and now it's expanded. But each of us had very different answers. And I think I wrote down all the answers at one point. So we'll have to go through those one day. But I remember we talked about something that Pope Francis is always talking about, a culture of encounter. And both Daoud and Austin asked, like, what does that actually mean? And never really had a good answer. And the more I think about it, it really is creating like a deep relationship and not putting off the deep relationships. And it's something that oftentimes I think society says you shouldn't talk about money, politics, or religion. And sometimes we use that as a way to isolate ourselves. And maybe that's why we're not supposed to talk about it. But here we come into a house where we start with all of that. And we don't let that isolate one another. And so I hope that going forward, I can still create spaces or be involved in spaces where you do create a deep encounter quickly. And that when things that should isolate us arise, that's something that we can come together over, even if it's not something that we share.
Yeah, building up on those points, I think the 2 years is just like, in some ways, like rigorous training of you. You learn so much from different faiths and traditions, and it's really, really valuable. It's a huge skill, even in the market. That's one point. Second, I guess you build a very strong network, both in terms of the community that's coming here, but also through the house with the people, the donors, the board of directors. Mo is really helpful in that regard. He would connect you with any person that you want to be connected with. And so both of those are like the networking and more of like the professional life. But just generally, I've learned so much about the Jewish faith now and the Christian philosophy. And if I go up and work in, say, Africa, and I'm working with a bunch of Christians, I'll be able to talk with them. I'll be able to connect with them than anybody else. If I had to go to Denmark and I had to build a community, I'll be able to tap on the Moshe House, because that's how I got to know the Moshe House, through the Abrahamic House. And there's so much potential that this place has and that you could utilize.
Yeah. Thank you so much for those answers. We have just a couple of minutes left. Is there anyone who has a question that they've thought of that, we could answer really quickly? Otherwise, I'm gonna let our fellows go.
Yeah, just a quick question. And also, first, thank you so much for having this, because it has answered basically all the questions that I had. And it really is wonderful to hear what you've done from your perspective. But I know you touched on this a little. My question was, what are if you can highlight a little bit more, the support system, what kind of support systems do you have in place for the fellows? What have you received?
Yeah, that's an amazing question. It's a very important question. And a few times when Austin and Alex was talking, I was thinking of adding on to that. So one thing that Austin said, that we have to clean after the event. By we, he meant a very nice lady, her husband, who comes regularly to our house and cleans for us. And we can ask her like 2 times, 3 times a month to come and clean the house for us. That's one thing. What else? That was on my mind. I wanted to say that. Yeah.
And in terms of like the logistics, there is a budget for house events, and so almost all of the out of pocket expenses are covered. And if we ever need to raise the budget, we just ask the team, and so far they've agreed to it when we're able to justify it. And then when you move into the house, they actually do a series of trainings for us on anti-Semitism and Islamophobia and different religions and how to engage people and how to create dialogue. I think there's 3 or 4 different webinars with experts to help us. And then Mo is the founder of the organization, and then there's staff, and the staff are kind of our liaisons. And so there's people who are able to help us, whether it's with social media or with coming in. And then there's also a local house manager who is able to kind of provide support during events. And so they're able to actually be the person who could open the door for people or to help bring out chairs or whatever. So we actually do have a local staff member based in DC who's able to give support for events.
And for events and for house management, that's very, very well supported. I mean, Jaime, our house manager, has been there when our dishwasher broke. And we were all at the office and couldn't take care of it. He would drive by, something you won't get at any other roommate situation. We're really coddled in that way. But also I think just emotionally and socially, I mean, I think Dawood's great at this. Anytime he has any thoughts or inspiration or a concern, he'll just pick up the phone and call Mo. And I think at our first meeting, we even talked about if there's an issue with that, you call Serena. It's very relational. And if you really feel like you can't talk to your roommates or you just want to share something exciting with someone, I felt that just the support network is very emotionally involved and cares about you, which I think has been important because this is an emotional thing. As you go through, you get invested. So we've been very blessed with that.
And then also so go ahead, Dawood.
Please go ahead. Oh, do you want me to go? I can go. I mean, it's just like, again, just highlighting that there is a support system out there, and whatever you need, there is a person to contact, and that would happen. Like it's if you don't have a lot of examples, it's because we might not have encountered so many problems, but if there is a problem, there is a person that can solve it.
I just want to reiterate that there's also the growing alumni network. Now we have, I guess, 6 people who are going to be in DC who have all lived in the house, and the prior 3 fellows are all regular attendees, and 3 of us are going to be hopefully going to a lot of events too. And so we hope, I think that's one of the goals of Abrahamic House, is as the years continue, the alumni network will grow and become a source of inspiration and help as you need it.
And again, to that point, I mean, we definitely drew upon the previous fellows to help us out for events, but also to get connected. I know that I was really excited about a rabbi, and we were able to lean on the fellows and some other support networks to have him come speak. I mean, he's Pope Francis's bestie from Argentina, and so to have him speak, someone I had studied in college, it was I was a little starstruck, but it was really special. If there's somebody who's involved in the interfaith space, it's not just the staff and the previous fellows, but there's a wonderful board of directors who's very involved and connected. I wouldn't call the night before an event and try to set something up, but if you call with enough time, if something can't be done, usually there's a really great alternative or a suggestion, and someone's willing to work with you to figure out how to make something successful.
Great. Yeah, I don't think I have anything to add to that. Thank you so much. I'm going to let the fellows go. Thank you so much for joining us. This was really great. Thank you for all the questions you submitted. And again, fellowship applications are open up until June 3rd. So if you have any questions at all that weren't answered, please email the info email and we will get back to you. Thank you very much for joining us.